Chosen one, a decree went out over your life before you could speak, and it did not say you would meet expectations. It said you would exceed them, every single one. And the fact that you are hearing this today, in this exact season of your life, is not an accident. Messages like this one do not circulate. They locate. This one has been locating you. Look at the world you are standing in. 8 billion people, and almost all of them will live and die inside the level that was predicted for them, not because they are lesser, but because no one ever told them the ceiling was false. You have felt the falseness your whole life. You would hit the ceiling, and instead of acceptance, you felt insult, because something in you knew the measurement was wrong. You have been called gifted. You have been called different. You have even been called chosen. But hear the tear spoken over you today. You are not one of the many who sensed more. You are one of the few in whom the more was sealed, waiting for a set time. And the set time is why this message found you now. Here is the revelation that reframes every hard year you have lived. What you thought was your limit was never a limit. It was a switch, a God-given capacity inside you that went dark when you were young. So gradually, you never noticed the lights dimming. The dimming was so slow that you built an identity around the darkness and called it being realistic. Every failure that confused you, every season where lesser effort beat your greater effort, every time you felt genius flicker and vanish, that was not weakness. That was a man running on half his inheritance and still almost winning. You were never behind. You were operating unplugged, and you still got this far. That is how big what is in you actually is. So let your body confirm what your spirit already has. If your skin tightened or your chest warmed in these last seconds, that is recognition, not emotion. Seal this moment with your own agreement. Type the words, "I will exceed every expectation." And stay with me to the very end, because you have walked 90% of this road, and what I am about to place in your hands in the coming minutes is the final piece itself, the one thing that turns the switch back on. And know this: the interference you have lived under, the fog, the fatigue, the perfectly timed distractions, existed because something understood the threat you become when you come fully online. It fought the switch, not you, which means the moment it flips, the fight is over, and the level no one saw coming begins. Some of you have suspected this for years. You watched people with half your depth build twice your results, and you could not explain it without either hating them or hating yourself. You never needed to do either. They were not bigger than you. They were simply switched on in an area where you were switched off. That is the whole mystery, and today it dies. Before this message ends, 3 things are going to happen. You will see the exact moment in your childhood when the switch went dark, and you will finally stop blaming yourself for years that were never your fault. You will learn the name of the false ceiling that has been posing as your limit, because a thing loses its power the moment it is named. And near the end, you will receive the final piece itself, not a theory about it. The piece. I am asking you to stay until it is in your hands, because an unfinished revelation can be heavier than no revelation at all. You did not come this far to hold half of one. Heaven does not open a door like this twice in the same way. But first, you need proof that I am talking about you, and not about some general person on the other side of a screen. So in the next few minutes I will describe 5 things about your inner life that you have never said out loud. If even 3 of them land, you will know this message was addressed, not broadcast. Here is the first sign. Ideas arrive in you already finished, not built piece by piece the way other people describe their thinking, but delivered, whole, like something placed on a table in front of you. A solution, a sentence, a design, a knowing. And then, before you can act on it, the clarity evaporates, and you are left holding the memory of brilliance instead of the brilliance itself. If that has happened to you more times than you can count, understand what it means. Delivery is not the problem. You receive at a level most people never touch. The problem is that the receiving room keeps losing power. Hold that thought, because in a few minutes it will matter more than you can currently guess. The second sign. You have always felt ahead in understanding and behind in results at the same time. You see the ending of movies, arguments, and business plans before other people see the middle. Yet somehow the people who see less keep finishing more. That gap between your perception and your production has been the quiet heartbreak of your entire adult life. The third sign. Being around most people exhausts you, and you have felt guilty about it for years. It is not arrogance, it is bandwidth. You process layers of a conversation that the conversation itself never touches, and shrinking down to fit the surface takes more energy than anyone around you will ever know. You are not antisocial. You are compressed. The fourth sign reaches further back. Somewhere in your childhood, there was a season when learning felt like breathing. You absorbed things whole, adults noticed, and for a little while you were called something special. Then something shifted. School got heavier, home got louder, life got practical, and the effortless thing quietly went away. You assumed you grew out of it. You did not. It was turned down. And the fifth sign, the one that proves the other four. Your life moves in cycles. A surge of vision and energy, a stretch of real momentum, and then, always at roughly the same altitude, the fog rolls in. Projects stall at the same stage. Breakthroughs collapse at the same distance from the finish line. As if something in you has a preset height, and every climb gets cut at exactly that height. If at least 3 of those 5 landed in your chest, then this message was addressed to you, and we can stop speaking in general terms. You are not scattered, lazy, or unlucky. You are a sealed vessel, and sealed vessels share symptoms. What you just heard was not a personality description. It was a diagnosis. This is also why you are further along than you feel. The road to the level no one saw coming was never 10,000 steps. It was 90% walked the day you refused to accept the ceiling, and every cycle since then has been the last stretch trying to complete itself. Now let me tell you something that will sound strange this early. That preset height, that altitude where your climbs keep getting cut, has been studied. Not in a church, in a laboratory. There is a documented reason why a mind like yours surges and then dims, and it has nothing to do with discipline, motivation, or faith. I will bring you to it before this message ends, because you deserve to see it with your own eyes. For now, hold on to this. Everything you have been calling failure was actually evidence. Evidence that something enormous keeps trying to come online inside you and keeps being interrupted at the same point. 8 billion people never even get the surge. You get the surge and lose it, which hurts more, but it means the machinery is intact. Interrupted is not broken, and that distinction changes everything about your story. A broken thing needs rebuilding, and rebuilding takes years you do not have. An interrupted thing needs one intervention at one point, and it resumes as if it had never stopped. Remember those words. One intervention at one point. One intervention at one point. Those words only help you if you know where the point is. So come with me to the moment the lights went down, because you were there when it happened, even if you have never once looked at it directly. Picture yourself at 6 or 7 years old. Watch how that child thinks. He does not separate imagination from logic. He builds a fortress and calculates its defenses in the same breath. He asks questions that embarrass adults because the questions are better than the answers the adults are carrying. Learning is not work at that age. It is appetite. That is not nostalgia. That is design. You arrived with your whole mind lit, both sides speaking to each other constantly. Vision, feeding logic, and logic, giving vision a body. Every genius the world has ever celebrated ran on that same conversation. The difference between them and everyone else was never the size of the mind. It was whether the conversation survived. Then the world got to work on you. Sit still. Memorize this. Stop daydreaming. There are no wrong crayons, but there are wrong answers, and only the answers get graded. Year after year, One half of your mind was fed and tested and rewarded, while the other half, the half where the finished ideas come from, was treated like a distraction to be scheduled out of you. And here is the moment the switch went dark. It was not one dramatic day. It was the season when being correct started to matter more than being lit up, when you learned to hide the strange, brilliant thoughts because they cost too much socially. The connection between the two sides of your mind was not severed. It was abandoned, the way a road is abandoned, one unused month at a time. I want to give that abandoned road a name, because a thing loses its power the moment it is named. We will call it the false ceiling. The false ceiling is the operating level of a half-connected mind, mistaken for the size of your soul. Every limit you have ever measured on yourself was measured under that ceiling, which means you have never once been tested at full connection, not once in your adult life. Let that reorder your history. The career plateau was the false ceiling, not your capacity. The projects that stalled at the same altitude stalled where the half-mind runs out of road, not where your calling ends. Even the expectations other people set for you, the ones you are about to exceed, were calibrated by watching a sealed version of you. They were never measuring the real one. If your eyes are stinging right now, do not fight it. Grief is the correct response to seeing how long you lived under a ceiling that was never load-bearing. But do not stay in the grief. The ceiling is false, and false things fall fast once they are seen. Now let me show you something before we go deeper. A morning, not far from now, you wake, and the fog you have carried for years simply is not there. The first idea of the day arrives finished, the way it did when you were small, but this time the clarity does not evaporate, because the room holding it no longer loses power. You move through the morning finishing thoughts, and the finishing feels ordinary. By noon you have done the kind of thinking that used to take you a week of good days. And the strangest part is not the output, it is the quiet. The war between what you can see and what you can execute is over, because both sides of you finally showed up to the same table. That morning already exists as a possibility written over you. What stands between you and it is one abandoned road. So the real question is no longer whether more exists in you. You now know it does, and you know where it was lost. The question is how a road abandoned for 20, 30, 40 years gets reopened, and why every honest attempt you have made to reopen it by force has failed. That answer is where this message turns, because the failure was never yours. The method was wrong. Because you have tried, have you not? You tried harder than anyone around you knows. The courses, the routines, the prayers at 5 in the morning, the productivity systems, the fresh starts every January. Effort has never been your deficiency. So why did greater effort keep losing to lesser people? Here is the mechanism, and it will sting for a second before it frees you. Effort travels down whatever road is open. When the road between the two sides of your mind is closed, every ounce of your pushing gets routed through the half that was kept awake. You were not building your genius all those years. You were deepening the groove of the half. The harder you worked, the more efficient you became at being a fraction of yourself. That is why the people with half your depth passed you. Not because they had more road, but because their whole engine matched the size of their road. Nothing in them was sealed, so nothing in them was fighting. You were carrying a cathedral through a corridor. They were carrying a chair. Of course they moved faster. Look how much you moved carrying what you carried. There is an old Greek word the ancient writers used for power, dynamis. It does not mean power you acquire. It means power already resident, waiting for conditions. When the old texts said the kingdom is within you, that word is what they reached for. Resident power. Your years of effort were never generating dynamis. They were knocking on the wall it sits behind. And this explains the cruelest pattern of your life. The almost funded, almost finished, almost discovered. The almost happens because under pressure, the sealed half sometimes flickers on. The two sides connect for an hour or a week, and you feel unstoppable. Then the connection drops, because it was never rebuilt, only borrowed, and the project falls at the same altitude as always. So stop reading your history as a list of failures and read it correctly as a list of flickers. Every almost was the real you breaking through for a moment, which means your file does not say unreliable. Your file says contained, and containment, leaking that much light, is a containment about to fail. I need you to feel the size of that reframe. You have spent years asking what is wrong with me. The accurate question was always, what is sealed in me? And those two questions build two different lives. The first one shrinks you to fit the evidence. The second one reads the evidence and concludes, you are bigger than your own results. Heaven has only ever asked the second question about you. Here is something you can use today. Before we ever get to the final piece, start catching your flickers. The next time clarity arrives, do not act on it first. Mark it. Say the words, that was the real me, out loud if you can. Write it somewhere you will see it again. A note, a margin, the back of your hand if you have to. This sounds small, and it is not. The half-connected mind survives by convincing you the flickers are flukes. The moment you begin recording them as evidence, the false ceiling loses its main argument, which was your own agreement with it. Identity moves before capacity does. It always has. And if this hour is the first time your whole story has ever made sense, mark this moment too. Type the words, it was the ceiling, 4 words that file your past where it belongs, and put heaven on notice that you have stopped testifying against yourself. Now, I told you the method you used to reopen the road was wrong, and I owe you the proof. Because some of you are already thinking that you have heard promises like this before, that you have bought the books and done the meditations and nothing held. You are right to think it. And the reason none of it held is the most important scientific detail in this entire message. Let me pause and speak honestly to the 3 people listening to this right now. The skeptic in you says, you have heard grand explanations before. The veteran in you says you have already tried everything, and you have receipts. And the quietest voice, the one that hurts most, says this might be real but probably for someone else. I am not going to argue with any of them. I am going to explain them. The skeptic exists because you have been promised falling ceilings before, and they did not fall. The veteran exists because you actually did the work, which most people never do. And the unworthy voice exists because decades under a false ceiling will teach anyone to pre-reject themselves before the world can do it. All 3 are rational responses to the same wrong method. Watch this. Every tool you have ever tried shares one hidden requirement. The books required conscious focus to read. The affirmations required conscious repetition. The meditation required conscious stillness. And if your mind wandered, you consciously dragged it back. Every one of them entered through the same door, the awake, trained, front half of your mind. Give that door a name. Call it front door effort. And front door effort has a fatal flaw when the goal is reopening the road. The front half of your mind is not neutral. It is the half that spent decades adapting to the sealed condition. It built your coping systems, your realism, your lowered expectations. Asking it to reopen the road is asking the manager of the smaller life to approve the demolition of his own building. He will nod politely and lose the paperwork. That is why the meditation felt like a fight. That is why affirmations felt like lying. You were speaking new words through old wiring, and the wiring won, not because you lacked faith, but because the doorway was wrong. The road between the 2 sides of your mind was never going to be rebuilt by the side that learned to live without it. Now hear the scientific flaw under everything I have said. In the middle of the last century, a researcher named Roger Sperry proved something so startling it earned the Nobel Prize. The 2 sides of the human mind are not one system with 2 moods. They are 2 distinct processes. The quality of a life depends on the quality of the connection between those 2 processes. Weakened or dormant, and a person operates as a fraction of themselves. Connected, and capacities appear that neither side owns alone. Science measured what Scripture had already sung. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, the old letter says. Not evil. Unstable. Divided at the root and leaking power at every joint. The ancient writers and the laboratory arrived at the same fact from two directions. Wholeness is not a mood. It is an architecture. And your architecture is intact but disconnected, which is the single most fixable condition a gifted person can have. You have already felt the truth of this, by the way. Remember your flickers. They never once arrived while you were forcing. They arrived in the shower, on the drive, in the half-sleep before dawn, in the moments when the front door was unguarded and the two sides brushed against each other for a second. Your best ideas have been telling you the way in for years. Not through the front, beneath it, which raises the only question.